I will try to tell you everything about how to use ORCID in DSpace-7 and DSpace-CRIS 7, and we will wait for your questions at the end of this presentation. First of all, let me tell you just a few words about 4science. We are a certified partner of DSpace, and we contributed a lot to the release of DSpace-7. And of course, DSpace-CRIS 7, which is a version that is aligned with DSpace-7. We are also a certified service provider for ORCID, and I will tell you more about it because it's strictly related to the ORCID services in DSpace and DSpace-CRIS. We are a solution provider for the Cloud Security Alliance, a registered service provider for DataSite, and we are also qualified for ISO 9001 for our support services for repositories. We mainly work with DSpace. We also provide services on DSpace-CRIS and DSpace-GLAM, which are two extensions of DSpace that are addressing specifically the world of research and the world of the cultural heritage. And we also provide services on OJS, DuraCloud, and Dataverse for data science. We share knowledge, we share innovation, and we share it with the community because they come from community involvement. We are working with OpenAIRE, we are working with the COAR, Confederation of Open Access Repositories. We have a member in the Next Generation Repositories Working Group, and also the deputy leader for defining the serif standard for the exchange of information in research information. We work with the IIIF community, and we are always present and sponsors of Open Repositories, this great event that involves all of us. And we hope next year it will be in presence right there in the United States. We support a lot of institutions. We have a large list of clients all over the world, particularly in Europe, but also in many countries, in Africa, in the Americas, in Asia. And of course, we have being based in Italy, we have plenty of Italian customers and a big group in Germany, Switzerland, and so on. So we are quite an international company. And notwithstanding the fact that we are young as a company, our team has been working with DSpace for many, many years. So a few words about ORCID itself, what it is and what it is for, which introduces us to the topic of integrating it within DSpace and DSpace-CRIS. ORCID is a unique identifier, a persistent identifier, a fundamental tool to identify researchers across their scholarly career. ORCID is an organization, besides being a tool, providing researchers, particularly with this persistent identifier. And it distinguishes every researcher from every other one, definitively, and it is extremely useful for disambiguation of researchers, especially related to the authors of publications, which often do not have a complete name or a name that is always quoted in the same time in the same fashion across different publishers, different journals, and so on. Publications, affiliations, funding can be connected to an ORCID ID, and therefore they're unequivocally associated with a researcher, and they guarantee a correct attribution and a coherent record of each researcher's activity. What about ORCID and repositories and PIDs and these research information systems, CRIS or RIMS, as they are also known, especially in the States? It's basically a recipe for added value. So research information and data systems integration with ORCID, and this is also related to repositories for institutional research output, such as those realized, implemented with DSpace. I said ORCID significantly enhances the visibility of the outputs that are deposited and their authors especially. It facilitates institutional data management across systems and supports national funding, assessment programs, and of course also requests applications for funding to funding agencies. It facilitates collaboration and networking, and it provides, as I said, author disambiguation. So why use an ORCID? Because research outputs are the fruit of the scholarly endeavor. They are integrated into the global open research infrastructure via a network of systems that are interconnected by identifiers. And this enables the worldwide community, and especially if these contributions are open access, to consult them and to build on the research that is available. However, the ease and practicality with which good ORCID practices can be deployed to these ends can vary considerably depending on the repository software that is used to deposit the outputs. And this is why we worked very hard to enable DSpace to exploit the ORCID and to enter into this networked domain of research. We have to say that not all ORCID integrations are equal because they can differ particularly in 4 aspects. First of all, the supported API keys, because there are public API keys and there are member API keys. And the member API keys are offered by ORCID for a fee, but they provide a lot of added value. The used API version, the current one is version 3, and the systems should use this version. They can differ also about the supported actions. First of all, the authentication, which links local data with ORCID. The read action, which allows to pull data from the ORCID registry, the ORCID profiles. The write data, which allows to push data to the ORCID profiles from the repository. And the webhook, which is a tool that allows, a function that allows to receive near real-time updates from ORCID. And we will see all of them in action in the rest, in the continuation of my presentation. The last aspect is the supported entities, because ORCID now can provide data about a person, the employment, education, qualification, work, funding, peer review, and more is coming. So it is also important to integrate information about all these entities. So what about the integration between ORCID and DSpace? As I said, we worked a lot to enable DSpace 7 to host ORCIDs for authors of publications and to be able to transfer them via the OAI PMH, for instance. And so regarding the 4 aspects I mentioned before, now DSpace 7 supports both the public and the member API keys, and it supports version 3 of the API, and this work was particularly provided by us at 4science. It supports the action read, which allows you to pull data from the ORCID registry or the ORCID profiles and put it into your repository, and it supports the person entity. What are the use cases and limitations about this usage of ORCID in DSpace 7? DSpace allows you to search the registry to identify authors in a paper, but please note that this use is discouraged by ORCID as it can lead to incorrect attribution because it is hard to discriminate among homonymous. So you find a list of persons with the same family name and first name and an ORCID number, and you really need to identify which is the ORCID number that is referred to the author of the publication. So this can only be done when the ORCID ID is recorded in the paper that you are describing, that you are submitting in your repository, and should be double-checked by librarians or some similar organizational measure that should be put in place to ensure the accuracy and the quality of metadata, so to ensure also a correct attribution of the ORCID to the specific author. And the ORCID IDs that are stored in DSpace are not authenticated, so you should not display the ORCID badge. This usage is also discouraged by ORCID itself. Only the authenticated ORCIDs should bear the ORCID badge. Here we see an example of the new submission form in DSpace 7. As you see here, we have several fields and we are prompted to describe the publications in the institutional repository, starting with an author. So we can implement this lookup in the ORCID registry. And we see here, we are prompted with a list of people and their ORCID number. As I said, you can choose it, and we see it in the screen. You can import from ORCID, and you can put the name and the ORCID in your registry. But as I said, you should also check it that it is the correct one after you have finished importing it. Configuration advice. DSpace 7 is pre-configured to use the public ORCID API. So without any adjustments, the searches will be anonymous. But you are encouraged to configure your API keys in DSpace, as it will help ORCID to provide a better support service. So try and get your ORCID credentials from the ORCID organization and get your member API to get a better service and better performance and more features. For instance, you can implement the right actions and read trusted party data that are really related to your organization. A word about the OpenAIRE compliance. The ORCIDs that are collected in a local researcher profile are exposed over the OAI-PMH protocol in accordance with the OpenAIRE Literature Repository Guidelines version 4. But again, keep in mind that they are not authenticated ORCIDs, so you need to be very careful as a repository manager to put in place the needed organizational measures to guarantee metadata quality and accuracy. So to be sure that your author is identified with correct ORCID, because then it is exposed via the OAI-PMH and it contributes to the world network of scientific literature according to the OpenAIRE guidelines. Now we will examine the integration between ORCID and DSpace-CRIS and how it works and what it can offer on top of what is already available in DSpace 7. A brief introduction to DSpace-CRIS. What is DSpace-CRIS? It is the first free and open source extension of DSpace for research data and information management that was ever developed. And the initial development was in partnership with the University of Hong Kong and the people from my team that joined 4science later. And it is completely based on DSpace software. So now DSpace-CRIS 7 is completely aligned with DSpace 7. And it has some additional functions, additional features that allow a configuration to represent the word of research, the domain of research in a richer way. One of the differences compared with other research information systems, for instance, the proprietary systems, is that at the core of DSpace-CRIS, does the institutional repository? Of course, being based on DSpace, it offers all the advantages of DSpace as an institutional repository. And we should remember that DSpace is the most popular repository software in the world. So it is really a leading solution for institutional repository. And this offers the maximum visibility via open access of the information, the outputs, and all the digital objects that are deposited in the repository. Why we created it? We created it for researchers, for repository and research platform managers, for research directors and managers, for all the institutional research users. Because, of course, it provides an environment that is optimized for the research domain. As I said, it is the first open source CRIS system featuring networks of entities, featuring ternary relations, featuring nested metadata, and a lot of features that are useful to better describe your research entities. It has more than 100 installations worldwide in all continents, and it has also some growing local communities, for instance, in Germany, in Italy, the Spanish community, and so on. And you can check all this on the wiki website, where all the information about the adopters, about the technical features, and about documentation, and also the user meetings are displayed. As I said, and as you can see here in the picture, it is an extension of DSpace. So it is represented with this circle that is extending the institutional repository to represent also other entities in the research domain. It is a ready-to-use, out-of-the-box solution. It has everything that is present in DSpace 7. And it also provides a default data model that is based on the OpenAIRE information space and the research information guidelines. So it really supports research information management use cases and specific workflows, such as the full ORCID integration. We are talking in more detail later, and pull and push and so on. The opportunity to manage and self-manage your profile and to curate it, to export, to build and export your CV. It provides data quality checks and tools, such as the duplication tool, the duplication and merge of records, the possibility of to implement the publication claim, and lookup for publications, patents, projects that allows you to import data in your repository. And on top of that, also a fine-grained security that allows you to control who's accessing your information and how. And it is easy to maintain, as DSpace is, and it has most of the administrative tasks that can be performed via the user interface. And as it is aligned with DSpace 7, it has a modern, it offers a modern user experience, and it has a completely re-engineered architecture based on a full REST API backend. So I mentioned in the beginning that 4science is an ORCID certified service provider. There are very few in the world, very few systems are completely compliant with ORCID, and one of them is DSpace-CRIS. So basically, being an ORCID certified service provider means including functionality that can authenticate ORCID IDs and update ORCID records into the products or the solutions we offer. So as a service provider, we offer our users, all DSpace-CRIS users, because it is a free and open source solution, the ability to update their records using their ORCID member API credentials in accordance with a good research community practice. And here at this link that I provide here, you can find more information about what a service provider is and what it means. And of course, offering this opportunity enables a better workflow integration and offers researchers a more complete, connected, and satisfying experience, so they can enhance their international reach while using their unique identifier also within the repository, which contains the record of all their research activity and production. DSpace-CRIS is a leading ORCID-enabled system because it fulfills all the opportunities that ORCID offers. So if you go to this page about the ORCID-enabled systems, you will see that DSpace-CRIS is at the top of the systems providing full integration with ORCID, even better than most proprietary research information systems. And particularly, as you can see here, it fulfills all the opportunities that are provided by the ORCID registries, which are growing every day to really provide better services to the research community. So, as I said, you can use the ORCID API version 3, which is the most recent. And you can do interesting things such as managing your synchronization preferences. We will see it a little bit later. You can link your ORCID account. You can log in via ORCID in your repository. You can manage your synchronization queue. You can push biography data. You can push publications data. You can push projects and funding. You can link them, you can push employment and education information, your qualifications, you can search for ORCID, and then you can pull other information, import publications, discover new publications via the webhook, and this we will also see a little bit later. And you can also manage the authorizations. You can authorize your institution to pull and push records on your profile and also revoke this authorization when it is more appropriate for you. So how to enable ORCID in DSpace-CRIS? There are a few steps that repository managers need to know to configure correctly ORCID in DSpace-CRIS. First of all, of course, you need to get your application credentials, whether they are public or member or the premium API, they're all supported. So you can go to the ORCID website and get your credentials there. When you do it, you access the ORCID site, you fill in the form, and you choose the API that better suits you. And you can also use the Sandbox API for your tests on your installation. The second step is to configure your DSpace-CRIS installation to use the right API and to configure the credentials and the scope that is fit for your repository with regard to the mapping of the objects that you want to exchange with ORCID, whether they are publications or profile information or projects and so on. So there is a file in the local CFG where you go and introduce the address and the credentials for the services that you need to use on the ORCID side. And the third step is to then improve the configuration to reflect changes or mapping actually in your metadata. So again, You have a specific file where to do it. In the modules /ORCID CFG, you find all the ORCID mapping configurations. So basically, you need to reflect the information coming from ORCID into your metadata and vice versa if you want to push information. So this is a place where you customize your ORCID integration according to the choices about metadata that you made in your repository. For each entity type, you need a mapping, of course. So if you are only exchanging publication data, you map the publications. Otherwise, you need to map, of course, also the persons, the projects, and all the entities that you're using in your DSpace-CRIS. So how it works. First of all, the authorization tokens and the preferences are stored in the researcher profile properties as metadata. So each researcher, of course, has one and only one ORCID, and it is associated not only to the researcher profile, but also to the management of the preferences. The application is checking for changes that are related to objects that can be synchronized with ORCID. And these changes are filtered depending on the preferences that you define and are stored in a processing queue that is managed by a database table in the backend. So the application basically uses the client application credentials to retrieve generic data from ORCID, such as the lookup for author names that I showed you before, import publication, improve researcher's profile, and the researcher authorization token to query for related information. And if it is required, to show or import information that is reserved for trusted parties too. So the first thing that you can do, according to what I said before, is the ORCID login. And here you see an example on the demo where you can log in with the local credentials that are registered within DSpace-CRIS, and you can log in with your institutional authentication system, such as Shibboleth, for instance, or you can log in with ORCID. And of course, you are not, it's not mandatory to use this kind of login. It can be activated or deactivated independently of the other features. So if you want your researchers to pull and push data from ORCID, but you do not want them to log in with ORCID in your repository, you can skip this opportunity. During the submission, as we saw before, you can use the ORCID Lookup. So researcher themselves, when they do the submission, or librarians when they proxy the researchers in this task, can identify the authors in the ORCID registry, or the system can use information provided by the external data source. So if you use the automatic import of bibliographic metadata from PubMed, for instance, from Scopus, you can visualize also the ORCID when it is provided. And the ORCID then can be matched to the ORCID that you keep in your system, or it can be added, and it can also be retained without a local researcher profile. So it can be used to enrich the information about the author, and for instance, the affiliation, if it is present in the contribution, as you see here. So the submission is made much richer because it can manage all this data. And here in DSpace-CRIS also the lookup is significantly optimized in terms of performance compared to DSpace. It takes milliseconds versus seconds. How to import a person, so all personal information from ORCID. You have this opportunity in the submission task to, as you see in the button on the right, there's a menu, and you can use several sources of data input, and one of them is ORCID. So you can select it and put an ORCID and retrieve the information that is available linked to this ORCID. Here, for instance, we find in the results that are displayed 2 publications. Of course, here we are using a fake profile with a sandbox. But if you test it with your researchers, you will find all the publications that are available in ORCID. So here you see on the ORCID side the 2 publications that are displayed in DSpace-CRIS that have been retrieved simply looking into ORCID with the ORCID number. What happens when the ORCID is authenticated? As we said, in DSpace-CRIS, it is possible to authenticate the ORCID, and when it is done, you can display the ORCID badge close to the ORCID. So you see this very small green ORCID badge close to the ORCID number of this user. When this is not the case, the information is displayed without an ORCID. Here you see another example. We have 3 authors for this paper. One has an authenticated ORCID with a badge, and the other 2 do not have. And here again, it is an ORCID, a researcher profile where the ORCID is not authenticated, so you can distinguish it because the badge is not exposed, is not shown together with the ORCID number. Now let's go to the settings. The researcher themselves can control a lot of ORCID features right from their profile. So here we have a profile of a researcher, and on the left menu you see that in the menu an item ORCID is displayed. So the profile owner clicking on this ORCID item can go to a page where they can control synchronization, they can connect or disconnect their profile in the repository, and using this ORCID section that is only visible to them. Here is the first setting. So here step 1 is no ORCID ID is associated yet. By clicking on the button below, it is possible to link this profile with an ORCID account. So you just need to click on a connect to ORCID ID, and then the ORCID ID is connected to your repository and to your profile, of course. Here you have a screen where you can enable your ORCID synchronization and connect or disconnect the profile. So here you see we have a list of granted authorization. This user can get the ORCID ID, can read information with visibility set to trusted parties, which means the institution itself, add or update research activities, and add or update other information about the profile. And on the other side, you have the missing authorizations. So you can always control what you allowed the repository to exchange and what you didn't. And you always have the button to disconnect your profile from the ORCID. And again, you have choices about the synchronization. So you can enable the manual synchronization or the batch synchronization, and this makes a difference. Here you see about the synchronization. For instance, you can select the way you want to synchronize things, and this researcher has chosen the manual synchronization, which means you have complete control on what you synchronize or not. Otherwise, you can choose the batch synchronization that is done automatically overnight, for instance. And then you can set your preferences regarding all the different entities that you want to synchronize. So you can set your publication preferences, for instance, to all publications, your funding preferences, or your profile preferences. And here you can distinguish between affiliation, education, biographical data, identifiers, and then you can change them and update them at any time. So this gives you complete control over your ORCID synchronization. And then, last but not least, you have the ORCID registry queue, because as the owner of the profile, you can evaluate the information items that you would like to push from your repository to ORCID and synchronize them or exclude them. So you have these buttons with a green one to synchronize, or the red one to choose not to synchronize it with your ORCID profile. So you can keep information in different ways in your repository and ORCID. It does not need to be synchronized mandatorily, but you can still choose what to keep in one database and the other one. Regarding the information mapping, as I said, you can map publications, funding, employment to the equivalent ORCID information using these external configuration files I've shown you before. And last but not least, you have this webhooks functionality available, which is very nice because it prompts you to look at what is new in the ORCID registry. So when you connect to your repository, you find alerts looking like this one. We found one publication in the ORCID registry that seems to be related to your profile. Please review the suggestions. So you click there and you find what is suggested to you, because ORCID is not only populated by you, but is also populated, for instance, automatically by publishers who use the ORCID as an author identification in the published papers. So you may find new information in ORCID that is prompted to your profile in the repository. And you can enable this automatic notification of changes and get the information that you can automatically import or manually import in your repository. With a premium API, so the webhooks enable this researcher control. So they can accept and import in the database, in the repository, or discard the suggestions. As I said, here you find how to. It's very easy because you see the details of the publication and you can hit the approve and import button or the discard button. You can also decide if it is yours or if it is not yours, and see evidence provides you with more detail about it. How you can include the ORCIDs in machine-readable outputs. They can be included in any format that is exposed over the OEI PMH. Also when, as I said before, they are collected at the publication level without creating a local researcher profile. So this makes your OEI PMH output richer, providing the ORCID for all available authors of publications, whether they are in your institution or elsewhere. And out of the box, DSpace-CRIS already supports the following standards and guidelines where the ORCID IDs are exposed, which is the guidelines for data archives that are based on the DataCite schema version 4. Although it's not published, it is imminent and already more advanced than the previous version. The guidelines for CRIS managers that are based on Serif, the common exchange format for research information, and the guidelines for OpenAIRE literature repository version 4. We already implemented this compliance for DSpace versions 5 and 6, thanks to funding from a group of Canadian universities, which we thank, and now it is also implemented in version 7. And coming soon, there is the signposting new protocol that is making the scholarly web more friendly to machines, because it allows you to expose relations as typed links in HTTP. So just to conclude this presentation, a few more words about 4science. We are an organization providing solutions for research information and data management and for the cultural heritage. Our solutions include DSpace and DSpace-CRIS, and as I said, DSpace-GLAM for the galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. We provide all kinds of services, from cloud software as a service to installation on premises, customizations, hosting, maintenance services. We bring decades of domain expertise in technologies, services, policies, open data, and we are committed to empowering the open knowledge infrastructure, providing open source solutions, interoperability, discoverability, connectivity, and data quality through secure solutions. Well, I think I will stop here. I thank you for your attention, and I hope you found this information useful.